a very special relationship with Sean because he's Ann Canterbury's grandson. Those of you who know Ann Canterbury. However, Ann was looking forward so much to being here. However, she's ended up in the hospital, but is doing okay.
And thank you all very much for having me and allowing me to come and talk about something that I have such a big passion for. Show of hands here, who drinks beer, who likes beer? You can be honest. Okay, so pretty decent. Again, if you take anything away from today, outstanding. If you gain, any kind of, higher appreciation, that's all perfect. But again, get out what you will of it. Most importantly, have fun. We're going to try some beer, do a little food pairing. I'm going to go over some history, styles, ingredients, a little bit on the brew process. So we'll get into all that. But thank you, Ann. Yeah, I'm a Cicerone, certified Cicerone. So she mentioned that it's essentially the same thing as sommelier is. It is the wine to beer. There's 4 levels of sommelier. I don't know how they all break down, but the master is kind of the highest. There are, right now, technically 4 levels of the Cicerone program. Does anyone, before I go on, does anyone know or heard about Cicerone? But all very familiar with sommelier, right?
Right.
So there's technically 4 levels of Cicerone. One was just introduced 2 months ago, and I don't think there are any actual, it's called advanced Cicerone. There's no one actually classified as that yet because it is so new. So I'm level 2 certified Cicerone. Level 1 certified beer server is what it's called. And then, yeah, it's very basic. Then to master. And just to give you some brief overview, I mentioned beer server. In the world, there's roughly 58,000 of them. So a pretty decent amount. What I am, certified Cicerone, there's just over 2,000 in the world. So it's a significant drop off. Then you look at Master Cicerone. Does anyone have any idea? Maybe you have an idea of how many Master Cicerones are in the world?
3.
Actually, a really good guess. There are only 10 in the world. So I started in the beer industry almost 3 years ago, and when I started, there were 4. So it's absolutely growing. It's a very, very difficult exam to pass. I'll go over the exams a little bit. So when I got in the industry almost 3 years ago, I took the beer server exam. Very simple. You study for a week, you get your basic knowledge, and it's a 30-minute exam, 60 multiple choice questions. You find out immediately if you pass. 2 years later, I'm studying for the certified Cicerone exam, and it's a little bit more difficult, and it takes a little bit more studying. I think it was like a 6-month lead time where I actually really studied hard with my work. We had a study group, and we would go to different bars, try different styles of beer, go deeper into the styles, get appreciation for what they're about, really break it down, and then leading up into the exam, we did a 3-day hard prep course of essentially everything you can know about beer, and we took the exam the very next day. It's a 3-hour written portion, and then there's followed by an hour tasting, and then there's a part where you have to video yourself with some like a beer faucet, which is essentially attach your draft system. So pretty intensive. Master Cicerone gets to, it's like essentially a 2-day exam. You're with other Master Cicerones, they're grading you. It's just, I don't know the very specifics of it, but very, very difficult with only being 10 in the world. So again, just a brief overview of that program and everything I've gone through. So that's that. I'll kind of just jump right into it. And again, I mentioned we're going to, a little bit about history, not a lot of time on that. Does anyone know roughly when the first beer was brewed?
Well, like Sumerian times, so
Sumerian
way
times?
back when, weren't they the Sumerians or Mesopotamians?
Yes, that's very good. And there will be yeah, so roughly 7,000 years ago, the first technical beer was brewed. and it happened by a complete accident. So they would essentially, they're harvesting their crops, they're storing them in big pot vats, and they're doing the barley. Before I go on, does anyone know the ingredients of beer? So we can kind of lead into that.
And then any other flavor.
Sure. Water, most ingredient, 96% of beer is water. Hops, barley, or malted barley, and yes, yeast. But those three main ones, those first three are the cores. So essentially what these people did is they filled these vats with their grains. It would rain, the grains would sprout, they would ferment because wild yeast would go in there, and they would come back to these things and they'd be bubbling. Like, well, what's going on here? And leave it alone. They try it and they get drunk, and it became the most amazing liquid anything I've ever come across. They would actually pray to the gods to have this potion come back. I mean, they would do everything they knew how to do, wait for it, and hope it would turn into beer again. It was pretty incredible. So, it was literally worshipped back in that time. Jumping to, a little bit down the road, 500 AD to 15, beer actually probably saved the world. There's actually a movie called Beer Saved the World. At 500 to 1500 AD time, beer was actually more potable than water. All the disease, the bacteria, the plagues that were going around. They had to boil the beer, boil the water, sanitize it, and it was more potable than water was back at that time. So people were getting sick from drinking water, and the healthy people were the ones who were getting drunk all day and having a good time. So it's, again, that's in history how beer is kind of progressing. Does anyone know there's a very important date, 1516, the German purity law.
Reinheitsgebot.
Right? Yes, Reinheitsgebot.
Give him a prize.
That wasn't a question, but for knowing it, yes, absolutely. And we will come back to that. Maybe we can remember Reinheitsgebot, which it's the German purity law. So the Germans said that there are only 3 ingredients allowed in beer, nothing else. So, like we mentioned earlier, water, hops, and barley, or malted barley. Yeast, of course, is factored in that, but that's Reinheitsgebot. Only those ingredients. So the Germans were all about producing these very clear, crisp beers. They had a lot of flavor from the yeast, but again, very Pilsner, lager-driven beers. You go right next door to Belgium, and total polar opposite, essentially throwing everything they can into their beer, and made very flavorful, different Belgian weird yeast strains, very fruity. Like dark fruits you get out of that, figs, raisins, all sorts of different types of really cool beers. So again, right next door to those guys, but just a little bit about what's going on over there. And today, of course, beer is a $1 billion industry. It's absolutely huge. It's blowing up. It's not just Pabst and Stroh's and all your lights anymore. There's a craft beer revolution going on. Everyone's familiar with craft beer, heard about craft, so that's a very prevalent part in the market these days. So let's get into some styles, ingredients. Does anyone know how many types of beer there are? Types of beer. Anybody? Throw something out there. You get a prize if you guess.
It's like 30 something. 30?
So, types of beer? There are 2 types of beer. There are ales and lagers. Ales and lagers, and that's derived by. That is derived by yeast strains. So there are 2 different types of yeast strains. Again, category-wise, but there's a million different types of yeast strains within those categories. So, ale yeast, lager yeast. Ale yeast is a top fermenting, warmer fermenting yeast strain. So that generally ferments around 68 degrees. Lagering yeast is a bottom fermenting, so in the vat it ferments on the bottom, and it's generally like a 50-degree fermenting temperature. It takes a lot longer to ferment than ales do. So going back to that craft revolution, a lot of the craft breweries are experimenting a lot with ales. Again, they're beers that these guys can pump out really quick, turn over a lot of product, get that product out in the market. I mean, if they were going to tie up one of their tanks with a lager, you know, they're not producing a lot of beer, so they really were influential on different styles, because there's so many things that you can do with these different yeast strains and these different ingredients. So we know how many different types of beer, how many different styles, and we were closer on that when I heard of 30. Some other, definitely bigger numbers and styles. I don't even know how many styles there are at this point. People are coming up with their own styles. But essentially, there's a lot of hybrid styles going on. But again, anywhere from your pilsners, your stouts, your porters, your wheat beers, IPAs, and then a million different categories within those. So styles and the type is different. So styles are derived from the lagers and the ales. So I mentioned IPA just a second ago. Does anyone know what an IPA is?
Indian Pale Ale.
Yes, Indian Pale Ale. It's soft. Yes, India Pale Ale. I'm not going to talk a lot about the different styles yet, but that's one that's pretty relevant right now in the market. It's the hottest style in the market. It's the fastest growing. It's got a lot of different subcategories within it. Does anybody know the story behind the India Pale Ale? So back when India Pale Ales originated in the United Kingdom, back when it was, people started to export beer, to make some money. They're brewing beer, different types of styles of beer from different parts of the world, and they're sending it other places, of course. So the ship voyage from England to India, it's a really long voyage. So the beer was getting there and spoiled. Hops are actually a natural preservative, so India Pale Ales are essentially over-hopped ales. It's a derivative of an ale. It's an over-hopped ale. So these people are like, let's over-hop these beers, preserve them a little more, and hopefully they can survive the voyage, and they did. And it was just, from there, it became a pretty big category. So that's how IPAs started. I said they were used as preservatives. They still are today. But they're the main component that you get your flavor from. Flavor, aroma. I've got a few hops in front here. Pass these off in a second. Actually, can you guys start passing these?
Are they all the same?
They're not. I've got 3 different types of hops, and then you get an opportunity to. Let's send the Cascade over to this table. Let's start. So I'm sending some Cascade hops.
I think it smells.
You're going to get a lot of different flavors from these. It runs from floral, resinous, earthy. You get a little citrus on some of these hops. Can you do this old Cascade too? No, over to this table too. So this is the same hop, but these hops aren't super new. Hops can go bad; they can turn over time. So those are the same hop, but you smell the difference in this one. It's not as bright. It's not as citrusy, fruity. What's that?
What does hops do?
Is it a grain or a weed?
It's a weed. Hops are a weed. They're actually very close cousins to the marijuana plant. It's very.
Oh, there you go.
And when you smell them, you will notice maybe. But it's a very aggressive strain. They're actually out. You can't grow your own hops in Chicago. They grow up on a vine. If it gets attached to anything, it can absolutely overtake, a large amount of space in a very
Is
short
it
amount of time.
indigenous to the United States, or is it basically an Egyptian thing that was brought over here?
Well, we have a few hop valleys. The Yakima Valley, Sonoma Valley, over on the west coast are some of the best hop growing parts of the world. So, did everyone get to smell those hops? Yes. So again, some of the flavors and aromas you get out of the hops are, I mentioned, earthy, resinous, piney, but they can also get to like fruity, citrusy. You get some grapefruit is a big component that people get out of it. Pineapple, mango. So there are two hops there. There's an old and a new, and you can smell the old one kind of lost their luster a little bit.
What do you mean old, like you open the package and it's actually physically old, or is it
Like
an old grain like?
I bought
an
these
heirloom
hops
tomato? Oh,
2
okay.
years ago. Old.
Oh, okay.
Like old.
That's strong.
And there are also, I didn't mention this, there are also some crushed grains on your guys' tables. It's essentially cereal grain. So,
Cereal grain?
yeah, you can actually eat it if you are brave enough. It's not going to hurt you at all. Just try a little bit. It is cereal grain. It's not gonna, that's the crushed the barley that goes into it here. So I would not eat the hops. Though. Do not eat the hops. So as you're passing these around and trying the grain, these hops that I'm passing around. So as you guys are smelling the hops and trying the grain, these hops are hop pellets. So they're actually condensed, they store longer, but people use hops. Pellets are essentially preferred, that's what most people use their hops in, the form that they use it in, but people also use whole cone hops. I don't have a picture of a whole cone hop in front of me, but it's essentially they pick them off the vine, ship them to the brewery, and they use those in the boil pretty quick after picking because they start to go. They don't have a very long shelf life.
What would you say the shelf life for the hops are?
If refrigerated, I've got breweries that I work with that store their hops for a year. But yeah, if you freeze them, yeah. These were not. So do you have the Cascade here? Yeah. So those old Cascade are they definitely lost something. The new ones, they're both very old hops, but you can still smell a little bit better on these. Yeah. Yeah, just bring the hop right in.
There's nothing here.
Yeah, the old are, I mean, you can tell.
Yeah.
And see, I thought the hops were just the one note, and now they're both things, the flavors, so it's
Oh no, the hops are, well, everything collectively, and I'll get into when we talk about the brew process, how additions of these hops can change how the beer comes out. They're pretty.
smell the old one. Did you smell the new one?
New and the old. So on the hops.